Chaim, everyone.
Chaim.
Amen. On the 15th of Tammuz, in the year 5720, the Rebbe left 770, and he traveled to Swan Lake, New York. The Rebbe was going there to visit the relatively new 74th year at the time, San Yisrael overnight camp. He just moved to Swan Lake, New York, and the Rebbe showed great interest in every detail of what was going on in the camp. You know, the Rebbe wanted to see every single bunkhouse. He pointed out small issues, like there was one bunk that was missing a mezuzah. The Rebbe pointed it out. There was like one old broken down guardhouse on the edge that had a sign on it, Zecher l'Churban. Remember the destruction. The Rebbe said, why don't you write Zecher l'Mikdash? Remember the Beis HaMikdash. And then the Rebbe came into the dining room, and it was visiting day, and the dining room was plastered with signs. Right? What do you have? What signs do you have up on visiting day? So in camp, the staff in camp aren't paid very well, if they're paid at all, and they rely largely on tips. Now the counselors obviously have a relationship with the parents. The parents come to speak with them, so they don't have. The parents know to tip the counselors, but the wait staff, the waiters and the kitchen staff don't really have. Parents don't really go to speak to them. And therefore, they launched a campaign every visiting day to notify the parents that they need to tip their waiters. And there are many creative signs plastered all over camp. So the Rebbe walked into the dining room and he sees all the signs: tip your waiter. And of course, the Rebbe took out some money. He gave it to he gave it to Yossi Weinbaum, who's the head counselor. And he said, here, the waiters do holy work. They do avodas hakodesh, right? And today, of course, all the waiters make sure to tell over the story. The Rebbe tipped his waiter, right? But as the Rebbe was looking around at all the tip your waiter signs, he noticed an interesting sign. One sign said, money is the root of all evil. Don't carry evil around with you. Leave your evil with your waiter. That was the sign. So the Rebbe looked at it, and according to some versions of the story, the Rebbe asked them to take it down. According to other versions, the way Rebbe tells over the stories is in the Living Torah, 828. He says, the Rebbe said, lav dafka, which means not necessarily. Right? I'm sure money does cause a lot of problems in life, but it's not necessarily the root of all evil. And money could be used for good things as well. And money can be used to accomplish great things.
Turn it around.
So, the word in Hebrew, in Lashon HaKodesh, for money, so one of the words that's commonly used is kesef, which literally means silver, because in those days they used to use silver, but today we don't really use silver anymore.
It's funny, because in Spanish, when you say to somebody, hey, I need plata.
Plata.
Plata also?
Yeah, plata. It means
Kesef is money.
So that's one of the words, which means silver, and it's used for money because money is silver. But the other word, which is used to refer to currency, to money itself, is dummy, which is also the same word that means blood. And of course, it's a little strange. You have two words, one word with two meanings. There's usually a connection between them. And a lot of people look at this connection and they say that money, causes a lot of blood to be lost. And but obviously we recognize that this is lav dafka, that money can also be used for good purposes. So why is it that the same word is used to refer to money as is used to refer to blood? Blood. Dam is blood, and damim is used to mean money. It also means plural of blood. So the Degel Machane Ephraim, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he says very simple. He says the Jewish nation, when they first became a nation, they were in Egypt. They were slaves. They didn't have any money. Slaves don't really have a lot of money. Right? They had, obviously they had.
You're a slave, you barely get paid.
They don't get paid very well. Right? When did the Jewish people finally you get money. I mean, there were some Jews who were wealthy throughout, even in Egypt. But when did most of the Jews actually get money? So, of course, we all know before they left Egypt, they borrowed the silver and gold of the Egyptians. But that was not when they first got wealthy. They first became wealthy 10 months before that, by the first plague of blood. So we know, first plague of blood, the Egyptians had nothing to drink, and the Jewish people had plenty of water. So the Egyptians went and they started grabbing away the water from the Jewish people, but as soon as they grabbed away the water, what happened? It turned into blood. And of course, so all children know, we have one of the crafts that all pre-1A and first grade children make, or kindergarten children make. They make a cup with the Egyptian drinking out of one side and the Jew drinking out of the other straw. And one side has water and the other side is blood. Even if they try to take the water out of the Jew's cup, they still got blood. How were they able to get water? They couldn't last for 7 days without water. So they had to pay them, and they had to pay them very good, very high prices.
Retail.
And
But how does it go, right? It goes by demand.
yeah.
At that time, it was a commodity.
Yes, and the Medrash says that the Jewish people became wealthy from that. And that's why the money, the Jewish people from that moment, they began referring to money as the blood money. Right? This is the money we got from the plague of blood.
Wow.
Right? So this says that the Degel Machne Ephraim is the reason why they share the same words. But this is something which is a little bit difficult to understand, because we're now, over 3,000 years later, and our money today isn't really connected to blood. Right? And furthermore, if that's the case, that they got the money and the plague of blood, so they actually got the money for water, not for blood. The money should have been called water, right? Why is money called blood? So, Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, the author of the halachic work Sridei Eish, he served as the director of the
Same thing. I gave you your own bag. It's the same thing.
Chaim.
Open the bag. Go on.
Rabbi Weinberg, the author of the Sridei Eish, served as the director of the Hildesheimer Rabbinical Seminary in Berlin from 1924 to 1938. Of course, that was destroyed in the war. And after the war, he opened a yeshiva in Switzerland. And they invited many of the great rabbis from Europe to come to the opening ceremony of this new yeshiva. And one of the rabbis that he invited was the Rebbe Shliach in Milan, Italy, one of the first shluchim, Rabbi Gershon Mendel Gorelik.
He passed away in 2021.
He passed away recently, yeah. And he was called to this ceremony. And the first thing he did is he wrote to the Rebbe to ask if he should go. Not only did they ask him to come, they asked him to come, and they asked him, together with all the other rabbis who were invited, they asked him to say over some words of Torah. So he wrote into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him to come, of course. He's a representative of the Rebbe in Europe. He should go to this opening of the yeshiva. And he asked the Rebbe, should he speak over there? Now, the reason why he asked is because Rabbi Gershon Mendel is known for many things. Right? He's known for his. He's known as a very, very pious. He's someone who sits and daven, who davens beautifully and who farbrains very nicely. But he's not known as the greatest Talmid Chacham. Right? He's not the most brilliant Torah scholar. And of course, he learns. He learns every day. He spends a lot of time learning. But here he was going to a ceremony with many leading rabbis in Europe, and he was a little hesitant to get up and speak over there. So he asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him, "Of course you should go and speak." And the Rebbe even told him exactly what to speak about. The Rebbe told him which sugya in the Gemara to talk about, and the Rebbe even told him where to find what to say. The Rebbe told him to look in the works of Rabbi Yehuda Eber, of Yeshiva from before the war. And of course, now the Rebbe told him what to say, so he took the sefer, he prepared, spent a lot of time preparing it very well, and he went to the opening ceremony of the yeshiva. Now he comes, right? There are many. It's full of very prominent rabbanim, and they call up the great Rosh Yeshiva himself, Rabbi Weinberg, to speak. And he gets up and he begins speaking. And Rabbi Gerelik can't believe what he's hearing. This guy is talking about exactly what he wanted to say. Right? He opens up, he starts talking about the exact sugya in the Gemara that he was going to talk about. And he's like, hopefully he's not going to say anything, he's going to talk about something else. There's a lot of ways you can take this. But he's going on, he's brings the Rambam that Rabbi Mendel prepared, and then he asks the same exact question. And he's sitting, he's like, what am I going to say, right? When it's my turn, what am I going to do? I'm going to get up there and say I have nothing to say? Right? I told him I prepared something, and now this guy, somebody else said what I was going to say. He's getting very nervous. He's sitting there. And he thinks maybe he's not going to say exactly the same thing, but he's quoting one after another all the sources that Rabbi Mendel prepared, one after another. He's quoting one source after another, and he builds up this big question, the exact same question that Rabbi Eber had prepared, and he had prepared the exact same question. Mendel doesn't know what to do with himself, right? It's going to be he's going to ask him to speak next. He's going to have nothing to say, and as it's reaching the crescendo, the middle of his speech, Rabbi Weinberg, who was already an older man at this point, suddenly stopped and he asked somebody to bring him some water. And they bring him some water, and he drinks a little bit, and he says he needs to sit down for a few minutes. And waiting, and he says he's not feeling very good, and he can't finish speaking. Okay, so the guy gets up, and he's like, and we're now going to call up our next speaker, the Rebbe Shliach from Milan, Italy, Rabbi Gershon Mendel Gerelik, and he gets up now with a big smile on his face. And we've just heard such a beautiful question from the Rosh Yeshiva, and, Hashem should help, you should feel better, but, I don't want to leave anybody hanging. So since we have a question that wasn't answered, I figured I would say a few words on the topic, and he proceeded to give his explanation that he had prepared. Right? You can imagine how this blew everybody away. It's one thing to prepare a speech and to come with a question and answer. It's another thing to have a question presented and somebody stop speaking in the middle and to call somebody up and finish the speech. Everyone was blown away, right? And then after the ceremony was over, Rabbi Weinberg was so impressed, he called over Rabbi Gerelik, he called him into his private study, together with a few other of his closest students, and he says, you're so young, but I couldn't believe the way you spoke today. It was so amazing. And he says, because I'm so impressed by you, maybe we can discuss something, and maybe you have a question for me we could discuss. So Gershon Mendel says, yeah, I have a question for you. There's a rumor, he says, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe got smicha from you in Berlin. So I wanted to know if you could tell me the story. And he said, yeah, it's true. He said I ran yeshiva in Berlin, and one day this young man approached me. He said that he was, he didn't want to talk about his family or anything. He didn't want to talk about who he was, but he said that he was in Germany on a rabbinical visa, I guess, and he had to get ordination from a accredited, yeshiva that was accredited in Germany, and he wanted to know if I can give him smicha. And so I said, talking learning, and I said maybe we'll tell me what Gemara you're learning, and we can discuss it. And he said, no, let's not talk about Gemara. I know that you publish an article every month in the journal that the yeshiva puts out. If you want, we can discuss one of your recent articles. So he brought up a deep article that he had written recently, and he says, within a few minutes, I was so blown away by this. I gave him smicha on the spot. So, when Rabbi Weinberg started to speak, right, his first thought was, my speech is ruined, right? It's destroyed. Everything I spoke, I spent so much time preparing, and now it's all gone. But what did it turn out? It turned out, in the end, this actually built up his speech, right? Had he come up and given that speech, it would have been a nice speech, but it wouldn't have blown everybody away. right? And this is true many times in life. Many times in life, we look at something's coming, and it looks like it's going to destroy us. It looks like it's going to tear us apart. But it ends up being actually what helps us and what builds us up. So, Nosson was he owned a business producing coats. And, he produced very high quality winter coats. This is in Russia where it's very cold in the winter. In Miami, you can't really run such a business
Just this
very
week,
successfully. Yeah, you can use good sweaters. You don't need the same quality coats. And of course, he had, he sold he sold his coats in many different shops. But his biggest client was Graf Shubalov, right? He was the local landowner. And every year, he used to order 300 top quality coats for all of his staff, all of his servants, all of his guards, soldiers, who had to be comfortable while they were on the job. They had to be warm, right? And this was like his big account. Most of his parnasa was from this account.
I got a few of those.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have a few of those. He had one, right? And one day he hears the terrible news. The Graf had appointed a new manager whose name was Jan Donetsky, who was known as somebody who didn't like Jews very much. And immediately the Jewish people in his towns began to Jan Donetsky, right?
Remember him?
Here, right? Just in case anyone wants to see a picture.
Is that what he looked like?
Right? It's not a real picture. So he was of course he immediately began causing problems for the Jews, and Nosson became very nervous. He was going to lose this big account, and the next it's coming winter, and he's not sure what to do. But then he gets the regular orders. A messenger comes to his business and says, they want to order the 300 coats. Now he's a little behind because he usually prepares it in advance, but this year he wasn't sure. So he says, listen, I have right now 50 coats that I can deliver right away. So he sends that right away to the Graf's estate. And he says within, 30 days we'll get the other 250. So he immediately goes out, he purchases all the materials that he needs, and he prepares the best quality coats. He doesn't want there to be he knows if there's any problem with these coats, he's going to get in big trouble. So he prepares the best quality coats, even better than he usually. Of course, he always did high quality coats, but this year was extra special. And he shows up, 2 weeks later at the Graf's palace, and the manager comes out. Jan Donetsky comes out. He's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I came to deliver the coats." "Get out of here! I don't want to see you." "You have an order. Ordered 300 coats."
Yeah, the invoice, right?
The invoice. We have everything. And he says, "The Graf changed his mind. Doesn't want any of your coats. You dirty Jew. Get out of here." What does he do? Right? Not only did he just lose his biggest customer, but now he has 250 coats. He borrowed money to produce these. What's he going to do with them? He goes home. What?
Maybe he's lying.
Even if he's lying, this is the Graf's manager. He has he's the one who runs his business right now, right? So he goes home. He's broken. He doesn't know what to do. A week goes by, and biggest cold front in like 30 years hits Russia, right? The Graf shows up one morning, and he's waiting for breakfast to be served, and nothing's coming out. He's like, "What's going on?" Like, a few of the kitchen staff got sick. They're colds. And he's like, "Okay, you can't replace them." "No, the servants outside are also missing. Everyone's sick. They're all catching colds, right? There was this COVID going around, right?" And he says, "What's going on? We get them the finest coats for my people who wear, my staff get the highest quality coats from Nosson's coat factory." And he starts asking around, and somebody tells him, last week, a wagon full of coats came, and your estate manager went out and yelled at him and sent him home. So the Graf gets very angry. Immediately sends a messenger to call Nassan. Nassan comes running with a few coats, just in case the Graf wants them. And the Graf says, "What happened? Why didn't you deliver the coats?" And he says, "I did. I came, and your estate manager sent me away. Didn't I make an order?" And he says, "Yeah, but your manager, he told me that the order is canceled, that you changed your mind." The Graf is furious. He calls over Danielewski, starts yelling at him, and he's like quiet. He doesn't know what to say. And he says, "Oh, you brought some coats. Let me see them." He brings them outside. He turns to some of the workers. He's like, "Look, we got good, high quality coats." And Nassan says, "There already are 50 coats that I delivered. There are already some people that are wearing them." And the Graf looks around. He says, "Who has any of the new coats?" One of the guys comes running over. "Yeah, I have the new coat." And the Graf says, "Are you happy with it?" He says, "Nah, not really." So Nassan takes a look, and he's like, "That's not my coat." And he tells him, "Take off your coat." He holds up the two coats to the Graf. Graf looks at him. He's like, "These are not the same coats, right?" And they look at Jan Danevsky, and he's like, "I got rid of them. I sold them. I replaced them with cheap coats." And now the Graf is really furious. He orders him arrested, and he's going to get a new manager. And he calls Nassan in. He's like, "I'm so sorry this happened. I see your coats are the best quality. My manager's trying to sell them as a side hustle, right? Or a side hustle of your coats." And he's like, "How much do we pay you for these coats?" And he's like, "I don't know, if they're 2 gulden per coat." He's like, "That's not enough. For such a high quality merchandise like you're showing me now, we should be paying you 3 gulden, right? Not only that, instead of 300 coats this year, I want to buy 600 coats because I have workers in the next town who also need such good quality merchandise with the cold front that just came in." And his business more than doubled that year. And what seemed to him to be the loss of his biggest customer turned out to be a doubling or a tripling of his business, right? And this is what's going on with the plague of blood in this week's parsha. We know that when the Jewish people are in the desert and they're hungry in the desert, so they start complaining. What do they complain? They say, "Hashem, we have no food over here." And in Egypt, we used to get free fish in Egypt. We used to get free fish. Free fish? Why do they get free fish in Mitzrayim? So there are many different explanations that are brought down. Exactly what does this mean, free fish? Some commentaries say it means freedom from mitzvahs, but the Zera Shimshon gives a very interesting explanation. He says that when the Jews were in Egypt, they were slaves, and the Egyptians did not pay them for their work. So how did they live? Right? They have maybe a side job. The Egyptians didn't really let them have side jobs. They weren't really allowed to open any businesses. But there was one thing the Egyptians allowed them to do, and that is to fish. Go fishing. And the Medrash says the Jews used to go to the water, and Hashem miraculously used to make, whenever they filled up water, their buckets used to fill up with fish. That's what the Jewish people lived off in Egypt. Right? The Medrash has many stories how the Jewish women used to go out to the river and just come back with buckets of fish. That was their parnasa in Egypt. Now, it wasn't a very good parnasa, but that's what they ate. That's how they had food in Mitzrayim. That's how they lived in Mitzrayim, off the fish. Suddenly, this terrible plague of blood comes upon the land. The Jewish people are devastated. All of our parnasa, everything that we worked for, the fish that we're living off, it's gone. What are we going to do? How are we going to live? We lost everything. Right? So what happens? So Hashem says, no, you didn't lose your parnasa. This is the source of your parnasa. This is how you're going to become wealthy. This very plague of blood that you think is destroying everything you worked for, this is actually the source of your parnasa. And this is why, from that moment on, they called money blood. They wanted to remember that many times in life, something, we see this thing coming and it looks like it's terrible, it's blood, it's going to destroy us. But actually, it's there to give us parnasa, it's there to help us out. And this is something that we all have to realize in our own life. There are many times in our business, or in any area of our life, but it happens very often in business. Something comes along and it looks like it's going to destroy us. It looks like we're going to lose everything. We're going to lose everything we worked so hard for. And we have to realize that this might be the source, the very source of our parnasa, and that's why till this very day we use the word damin to refer to money, to remember this very important lesson. Chaim.